Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Bonjour, mwaramtse, mwasuze mucha, siyabonga. I don't know how they say that, Minister Lawson, in Ewe, there in Togo, but I think you will give us a lesson on how best they greet there. A warm welcome to all of you to the launch of the first ever ECA BTCA Pan-African Peer Exchange series. Now, before we start our conversation today, and before I introduce to you our panel of speakers, there are going to be some housekeeping goals. Yes, these are things for you to know. Now, this event is being recorded, and we also have simultaneous translations in both French and English. Should you prefer to have any of these, you can select your preferred language by clicking the interpretation button of the Zoom call. Now, all mics are muted and cameras are off to keep focus on our esteemed speakers. Now, if you experience any technical issues, please let us know in the chat. And also, please note that we will do our best to assist you. We have a big team. We're not really limited in capacity while the webinar is running, but we'll get to you as well. We'd love for you to interact with us, ask any questions. We have already some questions coming in from the audience. And please click that Q&A to submit the questions that you think our speakers today should be able to address. Now, without any further ado, I want to introduce the person to give us our opening remarks. And before she gives us our opening remarks, let me let you know who this person is. One of the worst kept secrets though. Dr. Vera Songwe is the Undersecretary General of the United Nations and the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, also known as UNECA or ECA. Now, upon her appointment, she became the first woman to lead this institute in over its 60-year history. As you will notice from our speakers today, only Minister Tusabe is the man on this panel. We love the switch up in roles, and this also shows you the power that African women at the helm, not only African women, but women at the helm can do in enabling us achieve many of our goals and visions when it comes to leadership. Now, Dr. Songwe has been listed as one of the most powerful women in the world by Forbes and one of the most influential Africans by Jeune Afrique in 2019. Now, prior to ECA, she held a number of senior leadership roles with the International Finance Corporation, also known as IFC, and the World Bank. Now, without any further ado, allow me to introduce Dr. Vera Songwe to give us her opening remarks. The floor is yours, the virtual floor.
Hear me? Of course you can't hear me. Thank you, Arnold. Thanks for inviting me to this Better Than Cash ECA Alliance conversation. Let me start by welcoming my dear friend and colleague, Minister Cina Lawson, the Minister of Digital Economy and Digital Transformation of the Republic of Togo, Minister Richard Tusabe, the Minister of State for Finance in charge of National Treasury in the Republic of Rwanda, and of course, Ruth Goodwin-Groen, Managing Director of the Better Than Cash Alliance. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to talk about, I think, something we have all been propelled into, but which has had and delivered a number of benefits for the world, and maybe Africa needs to take better advantage of it. That is essentially how we can use digitization to improve our financial transactions on the continent. The COVID crisis, about almost a little bit over a year ago, was a health pandemic. But out of this health pandemic, what we saw was a huge reinvestment and use of digitization to continue to do the things that we could do. We have seen in the reports from the World Economic Forum that the businesses that survived the COVID pandemic and those who even did better are businesses like the platforms we're using today, Zoom, of course, Google, and many others, but also small and medium enterprise businesses that were internet linked or internet connected, were able to continue their businesses. We saw from healthcare to food delivery to banking being all moving online, and essentially having digitization manage the economies and keep the economies open as we began to social distance. The COVID pandemic, of course, had a huge and serious toll on our economies. Growth on the continent went from 3.3% to negative 2.6%. It is anticipated that we will go back to somewhere in the order of 3% in 2021. But the scars of COVID-19 are going to remain with us for a lot longer. One of those scars, of course, is how many more people on the continent are going to fall into poverty. The Economic Commission for Africa estimates that about 100 million more people will fall into poverty because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, when we talk about poverty, the next question that comes to mind is how can we begin to ensure that we lift these people out of poverty? What are the systems that we need to put in place to begin to deliver better services to them? Ensure, as we all know, that one of the most effective ways of getting people out of poverty is first to deliver social transfer programs and then to see how you can get them out of poverty. But we also have some small and medium enterprises that have been resilient, particularly in our urban centers. For those who have been resilient, they need to continue their businesses. They need to continue to provide services to the communities. But because of COVID, we know that we need to social distance. And so again, how do we work in a socially distanced way, but continue our financial transactions? We need to do better than cash. And that's hence the conversations we're having today. We know that because of the COVID-19 crisis, we've invested over $800 billion in social protection services across the world. This is a huge jump from what we did in 2008, 2009, after the financial crisis. So clearly there is a lot more that is happening around social protection, a lot more that is talking about cash transfers. We would like this cash transfers to happen in a seamless way across digital platforms. We have over 1.1 billion people, or 14% of the world's population today, that benefits from social protection and cash transfers. We cannot do this in a manual way. We have to do it better than cash. And that's, again, why these conversations are important. One way, a big conversation that we have had across particularly Africa is one on governance, one on transparency, one on the efficiency and effectiveness of public spending. The easiest way to do that is to ensure that a lot of these transfers happen on platforms that are traceable, so that we can, one, identify the people who are receiving it, and we can trace the use of those resources. Again, we need to use platforms that allow us to be able to digitize, first of all, get identities to the people that we want to serve. And one of the big problems on the continent today, as we know, is the lack of identities, particularly for women. So as we talk about better than cash, as we talk about moving to a cashless society, another important component of that is ensuring that particularly women get an identity to continue their businesses, but also to be helped in the event that they fall out of poverty. As economies digitize, the benefits from digital payments, e-commerce, just continue to multiply. For those of us economists who talk about the velocity of money or the multiplier effect, we know that it's much, much larger when we're using digital platforms, because then the money circulates much faster. We have seen, and one of the big conversations that has been a result of the COVID-19 crisis has been tax payments or domestic revenue mobilization, and can Africa do more? Before the crisis, Africa overall had an average of 17% of GDP in domestic and tax collection. We know that that is not nearly enough to be able to get Africa to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. When we look at continents like East Asia that continue to have 35% tax revenue to GDP on average, Africa has 17. A couple of African countries are doing well, South Africa 25%, but most of the African countries are below the 20% mark. We also know that a lot of this is as a result of the difficulty in collecting taxes, the difficulties in even for those who want to pay their taxes. The IFC, the International Finance Corporation, puts out this doing business time it takes to pay taxes. In some countries, it can take 3 months just because the processes are so onerous. Digitization can help us with that. We have seen in countries where we've moved from manual platforms for tax payment to digital platforms for tax payment, huge improvements, both in collection, but also in efficiency. Mauritania, of course, is a very good example of that, stands out as an example of a country that has done that. Burkina Faso. So I give the examples of Mauritania, I give the examples of Burkina Faso. These are low-income African countries that have been able to increase their tax revenues to GDP because they have introduced digital systems. This means that, you know, countries like Nigeria that have 7% tax revenues to GDP can clearly improve performance by doing that. The second thing, way that we can improve performance, increase revenues. Of course, when we talk about revenue to GDP, we're also talking about investments, right? The more government collects, the more they can invest, and the more we can grow and get to Agenda 2030. For wages, that's the other big area where we can improve and move to a better than cash system. We have seen in countries where, again, conflict affected countries. And I think the important thing about this whole better than cash system is how important it is, not just for middle income countries, but even more important for low income countries, for conflict affected countries. I've given the examples of Burkina Faso already, in the Sahel belt, in Mali. And now I want to give an example of Guinea-Bissau, where in Guinea-Bissau, the government moved from cash payments of salaries to digitized payments of salaries. And all of a sudden, we had a huge jump in the number of people that were getting their salaries, a movement in the economy, because a lot more people got paid, and there was a verifiable and traceable documentation of this. In Senegal, they have digitized 50% of their employee payments, which could add almost another $84 million to the Senegalese economy. So again, we see digitization not just as and moving to a cashless society, not just as a form of improving payment systems, but it's a form of transparency. It's a form of creating more revenue and more value in our economies. And of course, ensuring that those who need the resources and those for whom the transfers are made gets them. As the Economic Commission for Africa, we have launched a Digital Center for Excellence. In the Digital Center for Excellence, working with Better Than Cash and other institutions to see how we can improve these processes across the continent. We are fortunate that in the beginning of this year, the AFCFTA was launched. The ECA, working with Afreximbank and others, are developing the African Trade Exchange platform. Again, a platform that we hope will be able to boost e-commerce and business to business on the African continent. As we all know, we have different economies, over 50 economies, most of them using different currencies. And so, you know, again, Better Than Cash will allow us to be able to transact in varying currencies using the Manta platform from the Afreximbank that seamlessly does the exchange comfortability for you and moves business forward. We hope that this kinds of platforms will help, particularly small business enterprises, mostly owned by women, cross-border trade, to be able to improve their business, do better, and get to the prosperity that we all hope that Africa will be able to deliver as we move to the AFCFTA and grow our economies. There is an increased demand for expertise on digitization and digital payments. We're working, of course, with Togo and Rwanda that are here with us today to see how we can, under the leadership of President Kagame and President Cyril Ramaphosa, we launched the African e-commerce strategy. Now we need to move to implementation. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Better Than Cash, are collaborating. And this is one of those series of conversations to see how we can actually move our economies collectively. And that is the strength of both the CFTA, but I think of the African e-commerce platform, is to say, can we in a harmonized way, can we in an organized and a seamless way move our economies to collaborate on knowledge exchange, so that as we improve our economies from Kenya to Rwanda to Cote d'Ivoire to Senegal, that we can collaborate and get the benefits of digitization across the continent to those who need it the most. We have also seen, and I must congratulate both Rwanda and Togo for how they have used digital platforms to manage the COVID-19 pandemic in a way that would have been impossible had we not been able to use digital platforms, including payment for tests. So again, Better Than Cash, but also identifying, tracking, tracing, and treating those who have been affected, and hopefully now tracking vaccinations. So we are here talking about, I think, a platform that is a lot more important than post-COVID-19, because we are not going to be having as much personal contact, but hopefully also is going to be important for putting more resources into our economies and allowing us to get back to recovery much faster than before. So once again, I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have over the next series of discussions, starting with this one today, and hopefully that the continent can benefit from best practice examples that we have on the continent to build a stronger digital system for particularly our youth who are looking for jobs. Thank you again, and I turn back over to our able moderator to introduce our distinguished panelists, and I wish everybody a good session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vera. Very detailed with clear examples there of what efficiency can do. Notable there, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, who would have known that these are some of the countries that have improved their tax bases or expanded their tax collections as a result of digitizing their payments. And we really want to look at how this is impactful to, and that person who's deemed as the lay person, the layman down there. Now, without any further ado, allow me to introduce our panel of experts who are going to help us break it down with examples of how it has been done before. Some of them have achieved things in 10 days, some over 5 years. Some of them, the policies have been in place for the last 6-7 years, and some as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, leadership had to play its role. Now, allow me to introduce our two distinguished panelists. And just before I introduce the panelists, ministers, you get ready to ask each other a question or two. Feel free to piggyback off each other. And I hope Minister Richard Tusabe, you have a question there for Minister Cina Lawson as well. Minister Lawson, I hope you have 2-3 questions for Minister Tusabe. Now, allow me to introduce, to read you just brief bios of our panelists. And let me start with Mr. Richard Tusabe. Minister Richard Tusabe is the Minister of State in charge of the National Treasury. Now, Minister Tusabe serves, as the Minister of State in charge of the National Treasury. He holds a master's degree in strategic planning from the Edinburgh Business School. Previously, he worked as the Director General of Rwanda Social Security Board, also known as RSSB. He was also the Commissioner General of the Rwanda Revenue Authority. That's a very experienced taxman. Before that, he was the Deputy Commissioner of the same body in charge of customs services at the Rwanda Revenue Authority, and also a Chief Financial Officer of MTN Rwanda, which is one of the leading telcos in Rwanda. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for making the time, Minister Tusabe. Now, allow me to read the bio of Dr. Lawson. Minister Lawson is the Minister of Digital Economy and Digital Transformation of Togo, drawing from over 17 years of experience and expertise in the telecommunication policy and regulation. She's leading Togo through a profound transition to an all-inclusive digital economy. Now, she began her career at the World Bank in Washington, assisting governments developing countries to execute regulatory frameworks. Now, she has also been awarded the Harvard Alumni Public Service Award, becoming the first, the first African female political figure to do so. She's a graduate of Paul Paris and the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Now, Minister Lawson, you also feel free to speak in French if you're also comfortable with that, as well as Minister Tusabe. Feel free to try out your French for this session. I just want to begin our conversation with a question to Minister Lawson. And Minister Lawson, Togo over the last 12 months has taken some bold decisions and bold steps when it comes to digitization of payments in the country. There is something specific, bespoke, and if I'm not pronouncing this properly, please feel free to correct me. The novice policy that you led. Now, what did it take to have this done in just 10 days? And for all our listeners there, I've not made a mistake there. It was done in 10 days, that level of efficiency. Minister Lawson, what did it take to do that in 10 days?
Thank you very much, Arnold. Good morning to, or good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to the Honorable Minister. It took a great team, I want to tell you. It took the leadership of the President and a great team, I would say. What we did was that when we had our first case of COVID-19 early March, we knew that we had to take measures that we saw abroad in terms of physical distancing. And you know that the informal sector is very important for our economies. And so the President wanted to make sure that progress and that we made over the past years in terms of fighting against extreme poverty wouldn't be lost because of these measures. So he asked us to work on a solution, to find a solution to distribute cash to the most vulnerable people affected by our measures. And so what we did was that we were able to create a platform, a USSD platform. It's very important to mention that it was USSD because it didn't require to have internet connection, where people would register to receive cash transfers. And so we developed the platform in 10 days, and we had 1.6 million Togolese registering to this platform. You had to know that from onboarding to receiving cash, it was all digital. So people would register to the platform. If the platform deemed you eligible, you would straight away receive an SMS with cash, with the money. So from onboarding to receiving cash, it would take maybe a minute, you know, or less. So we had 1.6 million people registering to the platform. You have to know that 1.6 million people, we're talking about approximately 44 to 45% of all Togolese adults registered to the platform, and over 820,000 people became beneficiaries, which is approximately 22% of all Togolese adults, you know, and we were able to spend approximately $24 million. And all this platform is entirely traceable. We could, at any given time, we could tell you who received the cash, how, when, how much, how often. We were also able to do this because we just had elections. And so we had voters, most Togolese, over 93% of Togolese adults have a voter's ID card. So we were able to use this voter ID as a biometric means of identification. And we learned a lot from this experience because we took the decision to roll out, and in October this year, we're going to roll out biometric ID for all citizens. Because when you use a digital platform, it's very important to be able to uniquely identify beneficiaries. And it's also the success of this Novici program also is shaping the way social protection is going to be done from now on in Togo, meaning that we have decided to systematically use digital in order to provide the most vulnerable people with cash transfers and other benefits.
Thank you, Minister Lawson. Just before I get to you, Minister Sabi, Minister Lawson, I just want to piggyback off something, and I want to ask, Dr. Vera talked about efficiency earlier. She mentioned Mauritania and Burkina Faso as examples. You did this in 10 days. Putting my journalist hat on, why wasn't this done before? If it could be, the efficiency could be achieved in just 10 days as a result of the pandemic. Why did it take longer before?
So it's 10 days and 10 nights, I have to tell you, to render justice to the teams. Because, you know, before that, and it's true that the pandemic is a disaster, etc., but for us in the digital world, it has helped us greatly. Before that, to just implement this, we would have to go through millions of hurdles. It would have taken months, if not years. So we were able to do it in 10 days because there was no other solution, because we wanted people from onboarding to receiving cash to not go anywhere. We wanted it to be all digital. So the president pushed for it. We said, You know, the decision was taken, we executed upon it, and nobody could even, you know, say no to whatever. And we did the same in terms of digitizing. We did the same for the vaccine process. Now to get the vaccinated, you have to enroll online or through a USSD platform. We did the same to implement tests upon arrival and departure in our airport. We created an online platform, and all these projects were implemented, executed extremely quickly, just because of the situation. The COVID situation has changed everything for us in terms of digitizing the country.
Thank you. Let's look at it as a glass half full. There something good coming out of the current COVID situation, a few lessons for us there. Minister Tusabe, I want to bring you into the conversation, and I want to talk about another landmark policy that seems to have the people at heart, and that's the Ejoheza savings scheme. Now, for those who don't know what this Ejoheza scheme is, now it is a social policy. Or should I first? Let me allow the minister to explain it himself. Minister Sabi, just let us know what the Ejoheza policy is before I dive into my question.
Thank you, Arnold. Thank you for inviting me to speak and have a conversation about the digital payments. Well, Ejoheza is like you rightly mentioned, it's a program that is has a big social component. Basically, when you look at where we sit as a country in terms of savings, we are extremely very low. We are not doing very well on the savings. And considering that most of our population, almost 95% is what you could define as informal in terms of structure, formal and informal structures. And only, again, 95% is not covered in terms of pension schemes. So how do you capture the 95% that is left behind to come on board in terms of starting to save and retire with dignity? So Ejoheza comes to answer exactly that question. So in December 2018, a decision was taken to launch Ejoheza. And again, like my colleague from Togo mentioned, this is a USSD platform where you can save money in real time, irrespective of whether you're in a formal setup or informal setup. You save money in real time. We have an investment fund manager of that Ejoheza fund, and the return ranges as a minimum of about 10% every year. But to make it more interesting for the population to join the scheme, the government set up a counter fund matching fund where when you reach about $18, the government gives you a matching equivalent for the category 1 and the category 2 in terms of economic bands. But again, it's very important that as we get into this conversation, Arnold, we get to understand the journey of the government offering these services and creating this environment for people really to plug and play as and when we want and encourage them to do what they're supposed to do for the benefit of our citizens. One is to create a very strong digital access platform. So access is very important in that journey. Number 2 is having identification, which my colleague also mentioned, identification and registration, knowing who a KYC of knowing your citizens end to end, who is who, what they do, what their economic income levels, how they transact, and then how can you target them for any policy intervention and policy objectives. Number 3, then towards the end, that's when you come up with the digital payment. So the digital payment is coming when all this platform is laid and is ready to accommodate the digital payment platform. So Ejoheza has really responded to, according to our expectations. We have over 1 million students registered on Ejoheza today. They are saving on real time, and we communicate to them again using USSD how much they've saved what returns they are getting. And we are really optimistic that this, over the next 3 to 5 years, we can grow it and then address the savings challenges we've been facing in the country. So that's the Treasury program, which is just one program among the many that we have. Try to leverage on using the platform that we have already in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Tusabe. Dignity, humility behind both these projects, the Novice project and the Ejoheza project, according to the two ministers. So far, Minister Tusabe, over 1 million people have been registered for the program, at least by the end of 2020. And I believe the number should be a lot higher by now. But what role has digital payments played and mobile money contributed in enabling the registration and enabling more than 1 million people have access to this Ejoheza platform?
I think the impact is quite diverse. Again, when you go back to the platform that they are playing on is a platform that is already in place. So maybe to go back a little bit on the policy journey, where we've come from. Back, we set the vision 2020 way back, and one of the key pillars of transformation was ICT. So ICT has been on the forefront of all that we are doing. And again, in 2015, we got into a relationship with the PPP with a Singapore company, where we registered a company called Honorary, and which now has produced what we call IREMB. So IREMB is a platform that is offering almost over 100 services, government to person and government to government. So it's an end-to-end platform, and even Ejoheza is leveraging this platform to ensure that we offer the same services. So that journey has been a very impressive journey to speak about. And when you look at the impact of Ejoheza, again, I don't want to speak about Ejoheza in isolation of the other programs. For me, as we share the experience, it is very important that we go back to the policy room. And I want to share with you some bit of experience back with my experience in MTN. I think back in 2003, MTN started in Rwanda in 1999. In 2003, like any other African country, there was excitement of looking at these telecom companies as a cash cow. So they were making money, they were growing, there was excitement, and everybody was running to tax them. So there was, I think the peers in the region, they introduced the excise tax at that time, charge about 10, 12%. And we started having a debate and a conversation along those lines. And the leadership, our president said at that time, he said, no, I don't think we should really go and tax this sector. We are going to tax them, but let us have a long-term view, let the sector grow, let penetration get to the levels that we want, and then you start taxing it gradually. So at that time, we started introducing excise tax at 3% when our peers were at about 12%. And we took a journey of moving it to about 10% close to 2010. So for me, creating the digital payments, the policy environment has to be extremely enabling in terms of reducing the cost of ownership of our citizens to play and use the digital services. And for you to do that again, one of the policies that we've introduced in Rwanda is not to look at ICT as a cash cow, like I mentioned, but as an enabler. And that's what has really helped us to speak. Even when the pandemic came, I can assure you that we are very, very prepared to respond digitally. So that's the journey that we've taken. And I really want to recommend, as we get into a discussion, that countries that still see ICT as a cash cow, we need to go back on the policy space and redefine what we want, because let us create penetration and then let the citizens transact, and then the money will come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Tusabe. One key component in all these good policies, Ejoheza and obviously all this, there needs to be trust to be built between the citizens and the policymakers. Now, it's one thing to have a good policy, it's another thing to implement a good policy. And many a time, the citizens tend to push back. They always question these policies. I want to begin with you, Minister Lawson. What did it take for you to build that trust with the citizens?
It's a fundamental question, because when we designed the platform, we designed the program to give cash straight away. And from day one, like I mentioned before, it took less than 1 minute to receive the funds. So that was one thing. The other thing is that every single day, we would provide people with the data of the day. We would say how many people became registered to the platform, became beneficiaries, how much they were paid. The Novice program, we decided to give 15% more to women than men. And we were entirely transparent every single day on how much was spent and the percentage of male, female. The other thing we did, and it's not with regards to the population, it's even internally as a process. We hired an independent auditing company, and every day this auditing company would do daily reconciliation, So the telecom operators would send their data to the auditing firm, and the government, our platform, would also send our daily data, and there would be this daily reconciliation, because all these programs, it's not about cash transfer, it's about implementing new governance. What Minister Tusabe said about the prerequisite, it's a process, it's a journey, but at the end of the road, we're changing the way things are done. So we have this responsibility to do things the right way for the future as well. It will be very hard in Togo from now on to design a program without, putting the same type of methodology, and so it's very important when you think you design new things to think about the future, the sustainability, and say that you're setting up rules. And so I think that it's all these different elements of traceability, to have instant payment, to be able to have the KYC, to identify beneficiaries, to audit, to provide the population with information, to audit the platform every day. It's the combination of all these things that brings trust to the program, I would say.
Thank you, Minister Lawson. Minister Sabi, trust, that issue of trust, how did the government of Rwanda build that trust?
Thank you. And the trust, I think, has been built over years. One is to engage the citizens and inform them the journey that you are taking and where you're heading and the reasons why you're doing it. But number two is mainly defining what is in it for them. Picking on an example, like maybe paying taxes. We have what we call due date. On the last day when the taxes are due, people used to spend like 3 nights in the queue. You miss out on one day, you come back tomorrow. Now people can easily pay taxes sitting in their office. So that alone, telling that story and telling the citizens what is in it for them is very, very important. Number two is also the security, telling them the security component. Because it's one thing to have these platforms, and then the following day you have all these type of scams that are coming to really mess up the citizens. So as you build these platforms, you need to really be sure that the platforms are secure. And in the event that anything goes wrong, you again inform the citizens, and you should take responsibility as a government to pay anything that might be going wrong, rather than really pushing the cost to the customers who are the citizens this time around. So that's the journey that if we demonstrate what is needed for them, definitely they will come on board. And that has really helped us to ensure that people comply, and their adoption is almost 100%.
Thank you very much, Minister Sabi. Minister Sabi, there have been challenges as this happens. And some of those challenges have been, citizen declaration, we have cybersecurity challenges, the lack of skill sets to be able to implement these. How have you been able to overcome many of these challenges?
Well, I think let us go back to what I mentioned on how we started the Irembo platform that we use today. Because back in the days we realized that we didn't have the skills, 2014, 2013, and we decided to partner with a Singapore company, which was very advanced and serving the Singapore government. They had created a platform for the Singapore government. So we have the PPP with them to come and partner with us and walk into that journey. So that's how you start now creating confidence. But number two, as you do that, you try to build the capacity locally. And if you look at today, like the person who is heading Irembo, by the time we started the platform of Irembo, she must have been like in a secondary school. But there was a plan to say, let us really prepare these young people to go to the right schools, get the right exposure, and come back and head this institution and deliver the next milestone that we want as a country. So it's a continuous journey. We don't want to wait to build the capacity and then you start getting these platforms in place. People are doing it already elsewhere. Get the people to come work with you, but at the same time build the capacity to ensure continuity and sustainability. So that's how we've tried to address the challenge of capacity gaps, security. So when you get these people who have been exposed to playing in a bigger and more mature markets, chances are you really get it right, as long as you partner with them, with our people to understand the local context. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Tusabe. Minister Lawson, there's a very big challenge when it comes to policy making across the continent, and largely it has been historical, and that has been the lack of inclusiveness. People with disabilities, getting more women who are more than half of the African population as part of the people making those decisions. How have you, as Togo, tried to ensure that these people are not left behind when it comes to the implementation of these policies?
So first of all, you know, the whole purpose of using digital is to ensure that we are a more inclusive society. So in terms of foundation, it's true that a lot of work is being done to improve digital coverage of the entire country. You know, it starts by the infrastructure. We have this plan now to provide the majority of households with fiber infrastructure. It's going to take a few years, but it's really part of our thinking that we need to include all the districts into our development strategies. Now, in terms of the most vulnerable groups, it's one thing is that we've been working to identify all our citizens, and this project is also about creating a unique social registries. You know, again, the policy. It's easy to write policies, but if you can't identify who these vulnerable people are, you cannot implement these policies. I think that policy-wise, through all the process that we've taken the past decades, Africa has a lot of great policies. Now we need to focus on how we implement them. And I say we cannot implement them without digital. So that's what we've been doing. We've been working on technical platforms to say, you know what? Yes, how many vulnerable people do we have in this country? Who are they? Where are they? You know, and what type of vulnerability do they have? And that's the social registry that we have decided to implement at the same time as implementing biometric ID. This is going to be crucial in terms of policy making to fight vulnerability.
Thank you there, Minister Lawson. Mr. Lawson, I want us to dive a little bit deeper into that, put more meat on that bone. The implementation of Novisi, what kind of impact has it had on women's access to finance in Togo?
It was, okay, so the way we designed the platform is that we decided that people who didn't have mobile money account, the first government transfer would be creating this mobile money account. So we work with mobile telecom operators, and they set up their own platform to create this mobile money account. So we had more than, I think, 200,000 or 250,000 new accounts being created, and over, I think, 65% of these accounts were, of these new accounts belong to women. So it really changed the way things were, perceptions of using mobile money in Togo, and the population, the segmentation of who the users were. Just this cash transfer and the fact that we were giving more, that it was very simple. Simplicity is also very important. And I also have to tell you that we also used an offline, we worked with a call center. So because we had to make sure that people could call a number to complain if they had issues, So it's also very important to design things in a way that is customer oriented. And so the Novice project, the program, really helped the women, not only because it gave more money to women, but it helped women create mobile money accounts and understand the value of having a mobile payment system. Moving forward, what we've learned from this is that we have to pay attention and work more on digital literacy projects. So moving forward, we really want to design better digital literacy programs to understand, to teach women, to teach the population how to better save their money. But in terms of talking about women and gender, what we've learned is that every good policy oriented towards women has to address the men as well. I'm saying that because when you make cash payment to women, you have to understand that in most rural households, the household have only one phone. And very often the phone belongs to the man of the household. And so when you design the policies you want to give more to women, you have to find ways for women to also have phones. But if you give phones only to women in the household, they will give their phones to men, So you have to address the issue in a holistic manner and say, is it normal that in 2021, not everybody in Togo has a smartphone? And so if the answer is no, you have, and it's not the smartphone, because the phone it's a wallet, it's ways of communication, it's ways of education. So we're moving towards thinking and working with international donors to say, if we want to design sound social protection, if we want to communicate with our people, if we want to better identify them, we also need to provide them with, smartphones. And so we've been working with international donors to find a way to finance this program, but we think it's absolutely fundamental.
Thank you very much, Minister Lawson. Minister Lawson, we're opening up our Q&A session. We have a few questions coming in from some of the registered participants. And the first question comes to you. This is Mr. Abdallah Mashausi. I didn't give his location, but his question is, congratulations on getting 1.6 million people. That's a remarkable number. Now, how secure is the platform to assure the cash transfers are paid to the right recipients? He has a follow-up question there, which is, what controls are in place aside biometrical national IDs? And are there possibilities of one person registering twice to get paid? How these gaps are addressed? His issue basically is around the security of this platform. Over to you, Minister Lawson.
So the security, we created through a joint venture with a Polish company, ASECO, we created a cybersecurity firm, which is the operational arm of our national cybersecurity agency. And so the platform has been secured by this company in terms of making sure that there is just that one person cannot register twice. When you register, you go through a process where you input your voter's ID number, and this ID number is based on biometric data. So you can only register once with this. There's just one ID number, and we also set up the platform so that it would be one phone number could only register one individual. So that's how we ensure that that people couldn't register twice and through various identities because it was based on biometric data. But but other than that, again, like I said, we audited the platform daily. So every day, EY actually, to name it, would receive all the transactions, and every cash transfer would generate a unique transaction number. And so everything was audited every day.
Thank you very auditing every day checkup, basically non-sleeping on that job. Thank you very much, Minister Lawson. Minister Lawson, I'm going to come back to you, but before I come back to you, there is a question from Equatorial Guinea. That's Maria Del Mar Bokanka. She is from Maria Del Mar Bokanka Tabe is from Equatorial Guinea. She asks, she knows about the Singapore digital identity and digital payments experience. The private sector has had a role in those. What about Rwanda and Togo? I want to start with you, Minister Tusabe, and then Minister Lawson. You also let us know the role the private sector has played in that.
Thank you. I think the role of the private sector has been really extremely high, and it's still going on. But when you look at, for example, the way we started the platform and the investment that we made, I did mention about the access. So when you look at the access, the government comes in to set up a very conducive environment and investment through investing like in broadband penetration. Then the government gets the private investors to come, this time around like mobile operators. They come in the country, start operating, and then you create an investment platform for them to play that is very friendly for them to grow and encourage penetration. That's our policy objective. That each and every citizen have a phone at a very affordable cost. And that's why I did mention that the phones that we are getting even today, you don't pay any taxes on phones in Rwanda because we look at it as a tool that's going to allow the citizen to transact, and then you can tax what they are transacting with. By number two, you also have, so you have the actors who are importing the funds in the country, who are not paying those taxes. You have the mobile operator who is operating in the country. Our job is to create this enabling environment. And also when you get into developing the platforms that I did mention, you partner with the private sector. So the private sector has been on the forefront. And one of the key success stories of recent is a system that we introduced through the private sector, which we call Tap and Go. Tap and Go works in public transport. None of our citizens today boarding a bus from point A to point B uses any cash. All they do, they buy a card using their mobile money wallet. That card is used to tap as they enter the bus, and the balance is reducing depending on where you are going. And now when you put that into the context of COVID-19, where you don't want citizens to be touching money, then with social distancing, you are winning the game. So people are boarding the bus, no money transaction, no touching anything that they are sharing in the bus, so they are social distanced. So that's how the private sector is really playing a leading role. Our job as a government is to create a very enabling environment and creating the policy that will really facilitate the private sector to grow. And then we provide assurance and make sure that it's a win-win for the citizens, for the private sector, and for the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Tusabe. And I believe by winning the game, you're talking about the game of development and uplifting people out of poverty. Minister Lawson, any private players there in Togo?
Yes, so for the Novici program, the telecom, mobile telecom operators are private players. The platform itself was developed internally because we did it in 10 days. I don't think we had the time to actually, even engage the conversation with anybody. We just, we had very little time to do things. We had the internal team, and we were able to make it happen. Moving forward, we understand that we cannot, digitize the administration, the country, if there is no private sector participation. In terms of execution, the private sector is so much better than the public sector in achieving some of the goals. So again, like Minister Tusabe said, it's really about creating the right environment to enable private sector participation. And we've been doing that through upgrading our regulation, regulations and so on. So it's very important, that we rank first in terms of progress of in doing business. We've been working on various aspects to make our country much more investor friendly.
Thank you, Minister Lawson. You heard it from her. Progress of doing business there. Togo has been ranking first. Minister Lawson, I want to just piggyback off what you just mentioned there. Again, I'm still amazed by the 10 days, 10 nights situation. How were you able to get all stakeholders, to speak the same language during those 10 days and 10 nights?
The cash transfer program was the vision of the president. So I think that it was with the leadership of the president that we were able to make it happen. When you're a digital ministry, you go through experiences of, it's a transversal. We say our work is we're supposed to work with all the other ministries, and it's at times quite difficult because you have a vision, you want it executed in a certain way, and other ministries may not want to do the things the way that you think it should be done, or have a different vision for digitization, etc. So it takes time. It takes time. The onboarding of our colleagues can take time. The understanding of what digitization is, because we all use the word digital. It means very different things to very different people. For some people, you take a document and you PDF it, it's digital, you see? It's not the same as understanding what we're talking about when we talk about the platform, when we talk about single service delivery, when we talk about all these issues. A lot of people don't understand, okay? And so sometimes it takes time, but the president said, I want this done, and the vision is, if we have to implement these physical distancing measures, we have to make sure that at the same time we're supporting the poorest. So everybody was aligned, because it was no longer a digital ministry effort. It was the president setting the objectives for everybody.
Thank you, Minister Lawson. Dr. Vera, I want you to be ready. We want you to dive into some of the other questions that have been asked, but I just want to continue with another question. This one coming in from Africa Makasi. Africa Makasi asks, now, while digitization is a welcome development in Africa, digitization requires significant upfront investments in building an adequate physical payment infrastructure that is able to process such payments. Now, in a continent still grappling with attending to basic needs of its population, how do you address the challenge of infrastructure to enable access to government digital products? Basically, how do you draw the balance? I think, Minister Tusabe, you're in a very good position, especially when you look at Rwanda's history from the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 to where the country is right about now. Choosing between constructing a road and making sure there's internet, cable and fiber are being laid out. How do you draw that balance?
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting question, because again, yes, there are big trade-offs to make. There's policy coherence that we need to align. But more important, I think, is again to know what we need to have in the long term, medium term, and short term. So we have all these pain points where you are saying, okay, maybe I still have 20% of my 30% of the population below the poverty line. Should I arrange a paycheck for them? Maybe if I've been paying 100 francs today to each and every household, should I increase it by 50 to make it 150? To increase their social protection envelope. But maybe that 50 additional that I have to put in could build this platform that we are discussing about now. And hence, in the next 5 years, I start leveraging on the platform. So I think that's the question that we have now. So the answer is very simple, because we need to be putting our investments, the trade-off in investment space for the public's investments has to be having a sustainability and long-term view, but more important, inclusivity. So if you're going to be inclusive and long-term and sustainable, then you're going to trade off a few things for the short term with long-term and medium-term gain. So the platform that we put in place today, that is going to inform you of who is who, the KYC that my colleague mentioned about, then you can really make informed and targeted policy interventions. So some people would really put us to task and say, why are you investing in the broadband of $200 million instead of increasing the social protection? But even knowing where the social protection is going is not very clearly defined in terms of targeting. So you don't know who is graduating from level A to level B. You don't know who is backsliding to level C. So for me, that a trade-off that we are making, and the public investment management is very key, knowing where we put our money with the long-term view to say, let us have sustainable, inclusive growth. And I think that trade-off we are doing very well. But I think what I agree with possibly the question that was asked is to share experience and see who has done what trade-offs have you made, and what gains you have gained, and then provide assurance that even those people who are starting those steps now have that assurance and confidence that in the medium term and long term, the benefits will be far outweighing the short-term gains. Thank you.
Thank you very much there, Minister Sabi. Minister Lawson, I want you to dive into this question as well. How do you draw the balance between, spending on a road to spending on some cloud computing or cloud infrastructure?
So I would say that in Togo, we don't want to trade off. We took a decree at the end of last year to say that for any new infrastructure that would be built, fiber should be added to this infrastructure. New roads, new power lines, new tunnels, every time major buildings, we should add fiber. And it's important because when we say that telecom is an enabler, we need to make sure it's just there. If someone talks to me about clean water, I say, okay, I have a business model, and I think that companies that provide, for example, solar kit panel, the pay-as-you-go business model, pay-as-you-drink, where you put a SIM card on a platform so that for every time you go to get some water, you have to pay using digital means to pay a small amount, or when you pay your solar panels using a mobile money platform, it really enables. When we talk about inclusion, when we talk about basic needs, we argue that you cannot provide basic needs without the use of digital, and that's what we're doing. So it's not a matter of trading off, it's a matter of improving existing infrastructure. You see, you need to, for example, for water boreholes, we designed a platform so that the Ministry of Water would know in real time what boreholes had issues, So they have an interface, and when there is any issue, they know and they can go and fix it. And it's important because before this platform, it would take days, if not, I would tell you months, to even know that the public borehole at with this particular GPS coordinate had an issue. So when we talk about providing basic needs, we have, in terms of education, for example, you talk about education, we know that on our continent, we lack sufficient number of teachers. And we don't have necessarily the means to hire and pay all these teachers. So we have to implement digital platforms for education because it comes as a solution to clearly identify basic needs. And this is the case for education, it's the case for health, it's the case for water and sanitation, it's the case for everything. So we don't trade off, we have to add digital infrastructure, digital platform in every project that we design in the country. that's the way to go if we want to ever be developed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The hosts, they're going to kill me for this one, but ministers, I want you to ask each other one question that you want to learn from each other's policies. And you only have 1 minute to answer that. And I want to start with you, Minister Tusabe. What question would you have for Minister Lawson?
Well, I think the question I have for Minister Lawson is I need to understand the citizen registry that they are putting together, the platform that they are building, and how can we be part of that journey? Because I can understand now it is in early stages, and we are ready to participate and lend a hand in that. Thank you.
Minister Lawson, the answer to that, we have 1 minute, and then your question to Minister Tusabe.
But I didn't really understand the question. Is it participating in other African countries participating to the effort? I think that the platform is there. We're willing, and we've been talking to many countries who reached out to us saying, we want to do the same. How can we, make it happen? And our teams have been working with these countries. So yes, I mean, and in terms of policy, in terms of African Union, yes, we should also think of interoperability of various initiatives on the continent. Rwanda is doing great things. We talked about the Irambo. I like the fact that for public transportation, you tap and go. I think you said tap and go. We actually love this. We want to have the same thing. So we want to learn from what Rwanda is doing. We want to also share our experience with other countries. And so, I think that that's pretty much what I would say. And maybe ask Rwanda, maybe reach out to Rwanda offline to understand how we can better digitize our public transport system and the type of platforms that are put. Especially, I'm thinking of taxi motors. I know that I read in the news that it was entirely digitized. Now, when you take the taxi, you don't pay by cash, and we're very impressed by that. And I think that we want to understand the full process of making this happen.
Thank you very much there, Minister Lawson. Mr. Sabi, you had that question, the process behind that policy of digitizing transport. What did it take?
Well, I think, like she did mention, we can really get into details offline, but what we did, again, it is private sector led. It is purely designed by private sector, supported by the government. We give a little bit of subsidy to ensure that the system, the cost of penetration and ownership is low. So we're happy to share the experience in details, but it is mainly driven by private sector, and I would encourage even Togo, if they take that journey to use private sector, of course, creating enabling environment for the private sector to play in that space. Thank you.
Thank you very much there, Minister Richard Tusabe. And I want to bring this conversation to an end, but before I bring it to an end, I want to invite Dr. Ruth Goodwin to give us her closing remarks. Thank you so much. That was the Minister Cina Lawson, who is the Minister of Digital Economy and Digital Transformation of Togo, and Minister Richard Tusabe, who is the Minister in charge of the National Treasury for the government of Rwanda. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time. I'm sure some people are wondering why we didn't dive into that question with Dr. Vera, and unfortunately we are running out of time, but this is just the beginning. It's the beginning of these conversations, and we're going to have more of them. I want to invite Dr. Ruth Goodwin-Groen, who is our host today. Dr. Ruth Goodwin-Groen is the Managing Director of the Better Than Cash Alliance, United Nations hosted partnership of governments, companies, and international organizations that accelerate the transition from cash to digital payments in order to reduce poverty and drive inclusive growth. Now, prior to joining the Better Than Cash Alliance, she was the Australian co-chair of the G20's Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion and the Financial Service for the Poor advisor at the Australian Agency for International Development. Thank you for hosting us today. Thank you for enabling this conversation to be there. The floor is yours, Dr. Ruth, for those closing remarks.
Thank you, Arnold. Honourable Minister Lawson, Honourable Minister Tusabe, you are Africa leadership in action. I've been incredibly moved listening to your examples. And when we had the idea with Dr. Songwe and her team about putting together this peer learning exercise to share African leadership on digitizing payments, you were the example that we wanted to share best. You have it's just been amazing listening to what you and your teams and your whole government has done to be able to digitize those payments in Togo, in response to COVID, in the platform that you've set up in Rwanda. There are just 2 points I want to make to share with everybody that's really come home to me very powerfully as I've been listening to you, is building on what Dr. Songwe said, is that in order to be able to respond to the terrible economic consequences of the COVID pandemic, in order to be able to build on what we've learned on the better than cash options that are there, your example of transparency in both of your 2 economies is simply remarkable. You know, you've built both of these platforms on transparency, the audit example, the matching funds example. That transparency has really built the trust we've seen, and that is an example that everyone can follow, that will allow what Dr. Songwe called the velocity of money. What those of us who are economists is like, this is what we need people to invest, to use the platforms, and then that money turning around so that we can recover from the pandemic. And second, designing for user needs, that you understood exactly what your citizens needed quickly so that you were able to respond. You know, I like Minister Tusabe's example of what's in it for them, you know, so that they understand that this is good for them. And Minister Lawson's example of how you understood that women needed a bit more in terms of your social payments, and that you were able to ensure that each of those citizens got what they need. If they had a problem, it was solved quickly. So those 2, the transparency and the user needs, is part of what's building trust of responsible digital payments for Africa. So this is going to be an amazing series with ECA. If there are people like you who are sharing, the exchange was wonderful at the end. I wish we could have gone on for longer. So thank you so much for sharing your amazing expertise. And we stand with our colleagues at UNECA to be able to continue this very exciting beginning of series. So thank you so much for joining us, and back to you, Arnold.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruth, and thank you for being our host today.